Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Scott. I am one of the co-founders of GardenTags, a social network specifically for gardeners and people that love plants. GardenTags is the result of a challenge that myself and my business partner Daniel Richards set ourselves, which was to make gardening and plants accessible and fun and engaging for everybody. The world we live in has changed dramatically in recent years. Everything is moving at a phenomenal pace. Children can access media, only the media that they want, on demand at a click of a button. Everything is shared via social networks. And it's this challenging environment in which we have to engage people, newcomers to horticulture and gardening. For this reason, we thought a social network was the ideal solution. However, it is only one of many solutions. And this is why we've decided to hold this debate tonight. So firstly, thank you to the Garden Press event for inviting us to have this debate here tonight. Thank you to Jane Perrone, the gardening editor at The Guardian, who has agreed to moderate this event tonight, and our 5 panelists who have agreed to take on this challenging subject. So I'm now going to hand over to Jane and to get things started. So everybody enjoy the debate. Thank you.
Thanks everyone so much for coming. We're going to start this evening, I'm sure, on an explosive note. There's already been heated debate amongst our panelists about the topics we're going to be discussing this evening. So hopefully we'll be able to keep you all engaged for the next 45 minutes. There will be some time to ask questions at the end, so please do be thinking about what you'd like to say. The hashtag for this event is GrowRev, and you can tweet to your heart's content. And please do follow up with that hashtag in the coming days. We're hoping that this event will lead on not just to people thinking about these issues, but actually some action. So we need to be all thinking about how we might move this forward at the end of the debate. But let's not hang around. Let's move on and introduce our panelists this evening. On my right, we have Lee and Dale Connolly, if I can say your name right. Now, you're the skinny jean gardener. Are you wearing skinny jeans? Tick. Yes, you are. Excellent. And they're anything but your conventional gardeners. And they've bloomed into all that is green-fingered through their work on BBC's Blue Peter, on Jamie Oliver's Food Tube Network, and at festivals and events across the globe. And if you haven't looked at their YouTube channel, I highly recommend it. It's incredibly entertaining and fun. So check it out. And now, as I go round and introduce each of the panelists, I just want them to say in 2 sentences what they feel, what they'd like the future of gardening to look like. So perhaps we can start with you guys, Lee and Dale. We're in a sentence.
We're just deciding who's going to speak.
Oh, okay.
Being brothers, we sometimes you're
Who's going to speak? You're good at speaking.
Okay, I think. Okay, I'll do it in 3 words. Grow for purpose.
I like it. Snappy. Next to Lee and Dale, we have Emma Warolo. She's the MD and founder of the Pineapple Lounge. She's an insight strategist, an expert in Generation Z, or is it Z, and modern families. And she worked with global brands to help them build meaningful relationships with parents, kids, and teens. And she's had a panel of mini MDs, so she can bring an exclusive insight into what this generation thinks about gardening and how to engage them with it. Emma, what's your vision of the future of gardening?
I think I would like for young people to consider gardening as normal as any other activity that they do, and just part of daily life, really, less of a thing, which it feels like at the moment.
Fantastic. And on my left, we have the man who's definitely won the award for Best Panelist Name, Agamemnon Otero, who is CEO of Repowering London. His projects include the Energy Garden, the world's first citywide community energy and gardening project. And he also sits on the UK Department for Energy and Climate Change Community Energy Contact Group. It's a mouthful. As well as being a seasoned speaker on sustainable low-carbon economies. Now, Agamemnon, your vision, I'm sure you have one.
Socially inclusive, financially viable gardens.
That's good. I like it. Okay, and last but certainly not least, we have Adam Frost, 7-time Chelsea gold medalist. He started his career building Jeff Hamilton's gardens for the BBC at Barnsdale, And in 2013, he helped set up the home-based Garden Academy. And in 2014, he became the RHS ambassador, raising the profile of horticulture and encouraging secondary schools to embrace gardening. And he's recently written and published his own book, Real Gardens, which tells the story of his award-winning Chelsea gardens. Adam.
Hello.
What's the future?
What's
Tell
the
me.
future? The future. I would just like, actually, do you know what? I would like us to be teaching horticulture properly at secondary schools, and I think that might be a big answer and help all these going forward.
Fantastic. Perhaps, Emma, we can turn to you first to have an insight from your panel of
Yes.
people on the front line.
Yes.
Can you tell us some of the things that you found
Yeah,
from your
sure.
research?
So what we did was we spoke to a bunch of 8 to 14-year-olds from our panel, and it was really quite fascinating, actually. Most of my time is taken up working on kind of commercial brands, so it's something that I've never really spoken to children about before. And there was some positives and there was some negatives. So I think on the positive side, they were very fluent in the benefits of gardening. So the sort of messages that are put out there about gardening to do with relaxation, bonding with family members, good for the environment, and the pride in kind of growing something yourself. All of those were pretty clear, and they were able to identify them really, really easily. However, I would say that those sorts of associations are not strong enough triggers to overcome some of the barriers that face them to get into gardening. So in particular, I mean, these are Generation Z kids. They are digital intuitives. They're very, very busy. Their lives are often scheduled, timetabled. Both parents may be working. They've never had to wait for anything. They are, any kind of entertainment, anything that they want. It's pretty much on-demand living, and that makes them slightly impatient. I think kids can be quite impatient anyway, but this generation in particular, and that in itself is quite a juxtaposition to the very nature of gardening. So I think there are many other things out there that give them a lot of instant gratification in a way that at the moment certainly their perceptions or experience of gardening does not. So when we explored with them how to make it more interesting, the idea of making it more snackable, more bite-sized, more accessible as well was kind of what they came up with.
And Lee and Dale, how does that chime with your experiences of dealing with young people and getting them interested in gardening?
We're like perfectly matched, like sitting next to each other. I think what you said about being accessible and easy and simple is so important. I think me and Lee, we don't get caught in the subculture as much in the gardening world, which there is a big subculture, but there's the curse of knowledge, constantly the curse of knowledge, and we have to be really clear. If we want to encourage the next generation, we have to be clear. Why are we getting so bogged down with knowledge? Let's let them beautifully fail compared to not actually growing at all. Sharply?
No, I agree.
Okay,
So just wondering how far you're going to go.
No, that's not.
But you're totally right. Like, it's got to be short and snappy, and the information's just got to be there for people. So straight on YouTube, and like you said, it's just got to be quick. Because if it's too long, then mind goes elsewhere.
And I think the other interesting thing as well is they are also the most creative generation, and they came up with some really cool ideas, and for them it wasn't necessarily about making your own garden beautiful. They actually wanted something like cool that they could make for their bedroom or put on their windowsill. They talked about seeing Zoella make a geranium, did I say that right? and things like that. So giving them different ways to access gardening.
And you said there about putting things on your windowsill rather than in the garden, and I guess this is an issue for that generation. That where are these spaces in which they're gardening? Do they have gardens? Do they have any outside space? Does their school have any suitable outside space for growing? And I guess this is where you come in, Agamemnon, in terms of those. Where do we find those new spaces for young people who perhaps don't have any outside space to garden? Is it something that we can look to local councils for, or do we have to be more imaginative?
I think that's a really good point. what I do mostly during the days is I run Repowering, which works with local authorities directly on social housing estates. And so what that looks like is you're looking at between 750 to 1,500 social housing apartments over maybe 15, 20 blocks. And there's green spaces in between that's just mowed with grass. There's pieces that are being rolled over plastic, black plastic over it. So because the council doesn't want to pay for the upkeep of it, any tree that's fruit trees dropping apples on it, they cut them down because there's waste. Someone complains they slipped on it once. So, this is the environment that people are growing up with, that it's a hindrance, that they're living in a problem. That they, like a lot of the outliers in the communities that we're talking about trying to reach, besides young people, are people of lesser off means. And so in those situations, through Repowering, what we've been trying to do is set up financially viable renewable energy projects, which through the revenue, 20% of the capital cost goes back to a community fund. And that fund then allows them, over the 25 years of the renewable revenue stream, to plant whatever it is they want. And what we've been really excited about, because I set up the edible bus stop and the edible overground and energy garden, and we got about £750,000 from the People's Postcode Lottery to do that over London, working with, pan-London, in the sense that we have a partnership with TfL, where we can go to any overground station and now underground station and say, look, we've got between 2 and 10 grand, how can we make a garden that will be communicating with you, what do you want? And that's the moment where they get involved. So these energy projects take between 6 months and 2 years to get up and running, and the revenue stream runs 20 years. So with that, you end up saying, what do you want? And iteratively, you say, every year, we want to plant chilies. There's ethnicities here. They say, we might say, broccolis, potatoes, and onions in here, but there's actually a bunch of types of vegetables and things that we're not talking to communities about. They want to plant those things, and as well with flowers. We plant the flowers that we know. If you talk to the community and say, I really want to plant this particular type of flower or this particular type of bush, and then you start to get an iterative process. And that's why I really feel like it's important to say the financially viable and socially inclusive garden, like the vision is, because if you can show that gardening isn't just like a hat trick, like we got a little bit of money from a fund, or we have it's from the goodness of my heart, you can say that actually we want this, it can provide food for our plates, it can provide sustenance for our community, what we want to see, and also provide a job, a revenue stream. For that, it becomes a really excellent community cohesive organ for that, so they can actually be there and be a part of it and meet one another. And that's what's really exciting about using these places, which we think of on the sides of everything, which are actually the heart of the corridors, using the corridors as a way in which to,
So business is important here. We need to get business on board as part of that revenue stream. Adam, this is where you come in. You stuck your neck out and set up the Home-Based Garden Academy.
I've solved the whole problem.
You've solved. He has the answer.
We're just going to make him Prime Minister. We'll be done. That's it. We can all go home and retire happy. I think that's spot on.
You've done the hard yards, though, in terms of working with young people who perhaps would never have considered horticulture as a career. How is that on the ground in terms of actually convincing young people that...
It was me moaning. It was me moaning in a shed in the pouring rain at Chelsea. Someone trying to talk me into doing another garden, and me saying, actually, my wife and kids want me to be at home, but I'll do it if it's bigger. And we do as an industry. We talk about this problem that to me is a perennial problem, and we don't do as much about it as we should be doing about it. And it proves a point by somehow talking Home-Based into this pilot project that turned into 12 to 20 to 40. And when that starts getting talked about, the way it's talked about, excuse me, in that it's special and it's amazing and it's this, that, and that. Actually, in reality, it's not. It's just bringing 40 kids and giving them a taste of what's going on in horticulture, which horticulture is not just about, actually, if we're going to do it for a living, actually, it's not just about growing plants and understanding our environment and all those wonderful things that it should be, but it's about retail, it's about landscape, it's about design, it is about growing, so it's, but then there's all this event that they're going to have tomorrow. It's a massive industry, and I think showing young people actually that it's not just gardening, it's a massive industry and there's massive careers in it. That's the doors to me that need pushing further ajar.
Is part of the problem that careers advisors aren't very genned up on what horticulture actually is or what it's about?
I think in reality, I think we're probably all in this room, and I've heard it more than once in a secondary school situation where, you know, if you can't do anything else or you're not academically in the right place where you should be, you know, in the top 1%, become a gardener, which I just think is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard in my life, in the sense you actually become a gardener and then you understand actually the whole process of life and the whole connection with nature and everything moving forward. And, you know, for someone like me, it's changed my life. And so there's, you know, so it's not just educating the kids, it's also educating parents, it's educating teachers. It's, you know, there's so many people we just need to get in front of and say, this is amazing, you know. And it's that whole thing with cooking, isn't it? Even the media, you look back in my generation, when I left school, wasn't cool to cook, wasn't cool to be a chef. Now you've got kids that will leave school, work in boiling hot kitchens, not have great social lives, not earn that much money, but that's cool and everybody wants to do it. Why? Because a few people, the media brought in, a few people went, come on a telly and go bish bash boss, so the likes of these can do it, bish bash boss, have a go, drop the occasional swear word, and all of a sudden we've got a nation that wants to cook.
So what is the media's role in this? You know, are the media reflecting, at the moment, the diversity that there is in the world of gardening, or is it still a very middle-class, white kind of environment that we're being portrayed on TV?
I think for young children, I think there's very few role models to listen to and reflect gardening. And as I said at the beginning, I think the messages that are still coming across about gardening are traditional ones and ones that aren't necessarily relevant to young people. I think they are great benefits, but I think what's actually going to get them in and hook them in and get them more interesting are things like creativity, design, those sorts of subjects, and you just don't hear about them. I worked on a very similar project actually to do with coding and programming, and it was exactly the same thing. The career service is awful, it's really out of touch, and parents aren't aware of all of the different jobs in these different industries. So, you know, it is the responsibility, I think, and a challenge to your industry to, you know, position it in a way that is kind of more relevant and appealing to young people.
Lee and Dale, are there any young, I mean, is there anyone coming up on YouTube that you've seen who you think, wow, this is going to be the next, you know, cool gardening icon? Or is there anybody that you're sort of seeing coming through, or is it just you guys? Are you the only representatives of...
I mean, we do watch ourselves quite a bit on YouTube.
We would probably struggle to answer that question, and the only reason is that we tend not, and this is not that we don't respect other people's work in the garden industry, but we tend to do our own thing, and that prevents us from doing what everyone else does and being ourselves, because it's very easy. If you go to a lot of the garden shows and the garden events, a lot of the talks that are done, it's the same format over and over again, PowerPoint presentation or whatever you use. And mainly we try not to get ourselves caught up too much in that, and we want to, so we will pitch ideas which are, that we want to do. You know, we want to break from the herd. That's what we're trying to do. And it's very, very tough in this industry to break from the herd.
Why is that? Come on. You're about to say something then, you've stopped yourself. What is it?
I think it's because of money. I think people think that type of presentation of gardening makes money. But me and Lee are not thinking like, we're thinking this next year, how do we, you know, we've got to change the game. We really do. We really do. And the money, you know, we have to be commercial. You know, we have to have commercial value in everything we do. But that will come if we make a difference to a generation. That will organically come. Let's not make money the driving. You know, let's not be driven by money. Let's be driven by change. That's a tweet, that is. If any of you were talking to somebody who wanted to set up a gardening project of some kind that appealed to young people, to draw young people into gardening, what advice would you give? What are the first steps that anyone should be taking to get young people engaged? Does anyone want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that came up in my research was a conversation about tools and how actually, this generation are, they're so like cotton-wooled and sort of cocooned, and it starts when you have a baby. The amount of safety gear that parents buy now when you have a baby is insane. So these kids were like, well, gardening tools, we're not really meant to use them. And the gardening teacher that we interviewed said that was one of the most favourite parts of, was getting hands on those tools. So, there is a bit of a commercial opportunity there in kind of, allowing them to take more risks, to use things that perhaps they assume shouldn't be used by children.
I think that's a fantastic point. I have a son who's 5, and he is let loose in the garden with loppers and secateurs, much to the horror of other people. But actually, he has learnt. I haven't just let. I do keep an eye on him, But he understands fully the dangers involved, and he absolutely loves it. And he will go around, and I'll tell him what he can cut and what he can't cut. And it's absolutely his favourite thing to do because it makes him feel powerful. Yeah. He's got agency. He's acting. He's actually doing something. And so I think that's a really good point. And actually, if you look at other cultures, there's kids of 4 and 5 using machetes. I'm not recommending machetes, by the way, but just as an example that I think sometimes we do wrap our kids up in cotton wool and don't realise that actually that makes them feel good.
For you as adults, you would, tools are just part of gardening, you take it for granted, but you have to retrain your brain to think actually for a young person today, that's a really big novelty, and that, could be something really, really unique. And when you think like that, there's different angles of talking to them.
And Agamemnon, when you're dealing with these young people on housing estates, do you find that they have a big learning curve in terms of not having encountered handling soil, and do they find that a big jump?
No, I think everybody gets it. It's a funny thing, like you walking on an estate, and well, the first thing I want to say is all ages, all ethnicities, men and women. Like that's why you want to bring everybody together. Young people seem to be, you guys are all hooked. You've got the gardening bug. And I think a lot of old people who've had a chance to, and opportunities afforded them in life, have a relationship to the natural world. But a lot of times, particularly in cities, they have a difficulty becoming attuned to that. A lot of kids don't even know where their milk comes from, right? So obviously onions and potatoes, can they grow here? Can I get blueberries on the overground? Will they grow on the outside of Tufnell Park? I don't know. Yes, they do, and they're growing right now. So the thing is usually, if I was going to say how you do it, I would say, don't give them don't say it's going to be an allotment. Say it's going to be an open, like a community garden, right? So you say, here we're going to work together and we're going to harvest together, because we're not going to be able to provide everything we need. And the second thing is that when working with these young people, they know that we've created global climate change, that it's man-made. They know that the food system is not okay. They know that cows and pigs are being pumped full of pesticides and chemicals, and they don't seem to feel that they have the ability to make a different choice, because organic food costs so much money. And we've worked with lots of young people and then said, and we pay them a living wage, and we were in Brixton, and we said, we're going to give you the Brixton pound. I don't know if any of you heard, they have a local currency we helped to create. So we gave them Brixton pound, and they're like, that's great, let's use it. I told them about currencies, we worked on that. They tried to spend the money, and every place was like dead posh. They'd all, like Brixton had changed, like all the people using local currency, you could get, for a tenner, you could get like a pizza and like a fresh ginger lemon homemade drink, where they could get for £3 chicken and chips with a Coke. So they were like, oh, I don't want to use that. So this issue around money comes up again, and you say, like, what can we do? Well, we can grow the food. You can, instead of paying £5 at Marks and Spencer's for Valentine's Day, you can take one of these roses from this garden that we grew, bring that, the girl's going to like it much better, or the guy's going to be like, this is quite cool if you make jams or whatever. And the other thing was, I brought some here today, was the way we got 20-year-olds, men involved, is by saying, we'll grow hops, we'll grow our own beer, we'll work on the design of that, we'll make those things happen, and we can have a raffle or whatever for one of these or something. But I think that's the thing, and you just say, what is your demographic? What is the iterative process to work with them on? Like, what do you want? What can we give you? Because I think kids aren't asked what you want in the sense of when it comes to working. They're said, oh, you're going to do this job. You can have whatever you want for dinner, but you have to do this job, you have to do it this way. If you say, what kind of things do you want to plant? What kind of things do you want to eat? It's a very different.
The other thing I'd say generation is that they are a generation of natural problem solvers.
Yeah.
So, you know, talking to them about gardening because it's fun or it's good for the environment, all that sort of stuff, it's all fine. But if you give them like a real juicy problem to solve and show them that you could solve that through gardening, that's really motivating for them, I think.
It's also got to have a purpose. So young people have got to know what they're going to get out of it at the end as well. So if they're going to be growing carrots, why? What they're going to do with it? It's important.
If our work that we do with young people is quite vast in the age ranges, but one of the groups that we enjoy teaching or encouraging to garden is our friends. So in a few weeks' time, they're all coming around on a Thursday night and a couple of days before Mother's Day, and we're all creating presents made out of woodland bulbs and moss, and we're getting stuck in. And just on the purpose is the present to give to their mums and that community that we've created. We complicate it so much. Change 5 people today, you'll change 6 people tomorrow. And I think we can't change the world on our own, but we can change the world together, especially in gardening and horticulture.
Adam, what about you? Any tips for somebody who's looking to get into a community garden plan?
With young people, I think it's that connection with their food, but also connection with the environment. I mean, that's what they are taught at school, actually. What you said really is that we are slowly destroying what we've got. We just seem to be such an animal-centric society that we're just missing the point that it's plants that drive everything, evolution. You know, when you start looking at ferns, and they were about when dinosaurs were about, and that's pretty cool. But I think in a way it's just anything that gives them that freedom and then connects them with the real world, really. And I think you can do that outside a back door, you can do it in a park, you can do it in an open space, so anywhere really that connects them with their environment.
And where do the parents come into this? I mean, perhaps some of the parents are into gardening, but perhaps some of the parents are also very disconnected from...
I think the parents are so key, and I think actually came up really strongly in the research was that one of the ways that they thought they were most likely to get into gardening if they weren't already was through their family. So 21st century families, modern families they're more like teams now. Decision making is collaborative. Life is really busy. Quality time and stuff to do together, and specifically activities where everyone in the family can participate, are really highly sought after. And you know, gardening has such a big fit there, but I'm not sure that, you know, for mainstream families out there, they really consider it as a family activity. The kids that we spoke to who gardened with their parents for sure had very emotive stories and memories. I think the parents are so key, and I think a lot of the kids that we spoke to were much more motivated to do it either individually as something cool to make for their bedroom or put on Instagram, or with their family. I think for some of them, immediately taking a leap to go to something like a community garden or something like that for them was perhaps too much too soon, and using the family or using something small and snackable is a good kind of stepping stone to maybe do more.
I think it's very different holding someone's hand to pushing them, and I think we can't like push kids into growing their own, but from grow some herbs as a parent, grow some herbs, and then they're going to be the children are going to be watching and seeing you use the herbs in your cooking and that, and it's better to do that than to say we're going to a gardening club and you'll come in and you're going to have fun because we're just be authentic. Don't force anything.
It's like talking about growing herbs. If kids see you growing herbs, then they're going to want to do the same. It's like my 8-month-old can use an iPhone easy because she sees me using it all the time. So if she sees me growing herbs, then she's going to want to do the same.
My wife was actually quite a struggle to encourage. We're live, aren't we? My wife was not someone of it because it was very hard to get her to encourage her into gardening, and I'd done it through just through having the herbs around and using them in the cooking, and I think that's really important. So I've got nothing else to say about that. I've probably just offended my wife.
I think you're right that the link between food and gardening is one that, I mean, I often find this problematic in the media. Cooking pages are separate from gardening pages. Whereas actually, really, they're really interlinked.
I think it is, but just sort of play devil's advocate, I think the grow your own message is actually really strong, particularly in younger children, and that's their sort of first interaction with gardening. That, you know, kids at different ages, they're so different. You've got to move them on to something else. Like the tweens and the teens, they're like, yeah, I grew some potatoes at school, did that. Like they would be more interested in like the exotic plants, or making stuff, being creative, involving digital platforms as well. I think grow your own is brilliant, but I think we shouldn't just think, get kids into gardening will.
Did you?
Scott, I agree. I think to be fair on what you guys do, I think we're great up to in the primary school, and I think that whole grow your own and all that, understand a bit. The key for the industry and actually going forward is how we nail secondary school. So how we nail that transfer from you can get away and it's still reasonably cool to garden when you're at primary school. And then you start going to secondary school and those 16-year-olds look really big, and I'm not mentioning gardening because everybody's going to take the piss out of me and it's all going to go horribly wrong. But that's also the time when we can introduce them to industry and actually what the horticultural industry has to offer. And so for me, it's that period of time that we've really got to attack and change.
I find it quite funny that Dermot Gavin is the enfant terrible of the gardening world. And you look at him and think, really? Surely there's somebody younger and crazier.
He's not aging that bad, right?
Yeah, he's not aging bad at all. But it's just that that is what strikes me, is that there is a lack of anybody who would appeal to the YouTube generation, apart from you guys, in the way of. In the same way that somebody who's doing makeup tutorials, why isn't there somebody out there talking about carnivorous plants, doing a really cool tropical plants YouTube channel?
Get Taylor Swift into gardening.
Yeah, this is the way forward. This is the way forward.
Me and Dale only got into gardening like three years ago, and when we were at school, it was never mentioned. No one ever talked about gardening. It was never brought up in conversation, and it wasn't until we left school that we started getting into it. So I think there's definitely a problem somewhere in there.
Yeah, I don't know about the second. I saw Waitrose last year had a grow and sell app, and the idea was for primary schools to grow and then give it to their local Waitrose to sell, and then the money went towards projects at the school. And I think that came back to when you asked us what we're about, and I said grow for purpose. I think that's quite interesting, because if they know that they're collectively making a difference to their school environment, there's a purpose there. So we're growing this, we're selling it, and the school's going to reap the benefits. Amazing. So I think Waitrose are great for that, and their free coffee every day when they come on.
Other supermarkets are available.
Are you good?
No, yeah, we're good.
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking that, so with this Energy Garden project, the partnership with TfL, what's interesting is we have 50 stations we're doing. And we have a schools program. We have £40,000 to support schools getting into gardening. We have another 40 to help do paid internships over the course of the year. But what's been really interesting is going to each station and saying, okay, if anybody wants to get involved, and the iterative process to learn about what people want. And it's been fascinating. Over and over again, areas, they don't know each other, and they're asking the same things. So all of the sort of 20-somethings in Hackney want biodiversity. They wanted bat huts, they wanted little pools and springs and like little night creatures and really weird, and I thought, okay, that's weird. Then all the people wanted and right around Hampstead, they all wanted chilies growing, they wanted gardening and food, and then some kind of roses, and it was really interesting how, even though we didn't know them, there was like a zeitgeist of an area that people were saying, oh, we really want to do this. They didn't matter about socioeconomic or cultural, but on top of that, another layer, which I thought was really interesting, was that individual people were coming together and saying, I want something that's not necessarily a garden, but it hits the whole sector, because we're talking about how do we get to kids, how do we get to the adults, but actually there's a whole culture of 20-somethings, 30-somethings that want to have purpose, but also, and it doesn't just mean food, it means flowers, it means gardening, and they're your market, but they're also the people who will change the world,
Just by the way, our friends are not all 14 years old.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is that we have this huge momentum going of like a wave of young people who don't feel that they have a way in because they don't. It's the bracket of people not being able to afford their own homes. The renters can't like dig up the garden. They don't have their own backyard. Where do we go with it? What can we do? And also we're so busy. How much time can I put? I can only put an hour in a month.
That's the interesting bit. How many of those people, in a sense, they look upon it as, well, you're talking about growing chilies, doing this, and want the connection with the environment. How many people do you think understand that can be a career?
Yeah.
That's the interesting bit. How many of those, if we took those to one side and said, do you know what, you lot can make a living doing this, and I wonder how many really understand it in that way.
I was just going back to something that you guys said about knowledge, which was really interesting. And this is something I struggle with as somebody who is, if you read the blog that I wrote on GardenTags/revolution, you can find out what a total square I was as a child. I probably shouldn't be chairing this debate because I was the biggest square and was always into gardening from the very first day that I picked up a packet of seeds. And I love Latin names, and I'm just weird. I'm a weird person. I love Latin names. I love all the knowledge. So I kind of find that quite disturbing, you saying, throw aside the knowledge and make it fun, because I kind of want to impart the knowledge. So I'm constantly like in a narrative with my children going, yes, that's a monkey puzzle tree, and actually they are taking some of it in, even despite my boring conversations with them. But going back to that thing about knowledge, can you expand on that a bit more? Because I find that really interesting.
Okay.
It's not like a blanket statement, this.
No.
So just to clear up, but professionals built the Titanic, amateurs built the Ark, and the Ark stayed afloat. So knowledge is really, really important, but to inspire them to beautifully fail, for us, in our work, is even more important. If we can just see them get their hands muddy, get their hands dirty, get stuck in, and grow something that, I had all my groomsmen grow the wedding flowers, and some of them came out terrible.
A lot.
Terrible.
A lot.
Fortunately, you grew some great flowers for the wedding. Do you know something? It didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. We had such a fantastic time, in the lead up to growing them and harvesting them and arranging them. It was the whole experience. It didn't matter what they turned out like. They actually started gardening. They started growing. Sorry.
And that didn't put them off. Failing didn't put them off. That's an interesting point. That's kind of, I always assume that if you fail, like as in if you don't produce, if everything gets munched, then it's going to put you off.
No, not at all.
I think it puts adults off. I don't
Yeah,
think it puts kids off.
there you go.
I think adults get scared by failure. But I think what you're saying, is a sense is don't put them off with the fear of knowledge. Yeah, it's which is maybe part of the problem sometimes with gardening, is that there's a fear factor to gardening that builds a divide up, and that's not just with kids. That's with adults as well, and we build it up because we do. You talk about Latin names. Is it Clematis? Is it Clematis? Who really gives a? But it becomes.
I remember the moment of
but
fear.
It becomes important, doesn't it?
Yeah, having read the gardening books.
You can get in the public eye, but you feel a bit. Well, I've said that wrong. I've said that right.
I remember that moment of saying the word out loud and going,
Latin
is it this?
scares the life out of me.
Yeah.
Absolutely scares the life out of me. So I break them all down and I create these visual things in my mind. And so I think the fear thing's a big. So I get what you're saying, really. I get what you're saying.
How do we tackle that fear?
I would just say, if you think about, flip it the other way, that what keeps a lot of people in their positions is saying, I know what I'm talking about. I know all the Latin names. I've made this here. So it's like, I studied math, medicine, and architecture. And what the biggest thing was learning those languages. And I remember I was very ill as a young man. And when I said, what do you think is wrong? The doctors didn't know. But they weren't going to say, I don't know. They went through all of this rigmarole, and it was really just a journey to show that they had studied a lot. So they could say, I don't know, in a very complicated way that made them sound like they knew. And a lot of times I think that's what's happening in every sector. And it's happening right now to our sector, and we need to be careful and be inclusive and just say, look, it is Clemis Amandi, it's right there. And so what we need to do is put the next name and have fun with it. It might be, and tastes good, cooked with this. So it's just having fun. But I think that there is that thing, we use it both sides to stay safe. So that's why.
There's here in London, there's something called Run Them, and they have it's a running club as such. But they say that if you're coming to this club to try and beat your personal best, then this club is not for you. And I think that's so interesting that they're letting people come to this running club as such. It does a lot more than that. But it doesn't matter if you can run. You know, no one's in a competition with each other at Run Dem.
Yeah.
Everyone's there in community and they're experiencing, you know, something together. I think that's quite an inspiration for us in gardening and horticulture. Run
Fantastic.
Dem.
Well, we're coming up to roughly about 45 minutes. Perhaps I'll just allow the panellists to mention anything we've missed, and then we'll go on to some questions. Is there anything else that any of you is burning to say before we move on to questions that we haven't mentioned already?
I would only just say around like ethnicity, and just saying that like getting young men into gardening is a bit, like 14 to 20 on these estates is quite difficult, and you know, I can't usually legally say, you know, let's make hops and drink beer with them. So you know, having a tactile way of sort of what they can make and do is important, and also particularly getting young women of ethnic minorities to get involved in gardening has been an issue, and I think I'd really like to open that out to the people and say, like, how do you think you can bring them in? Because these are, you know, they all want to be a part of the community, and it's a really good, because we were saying before we got started, we need to be addressing these issues because they're there. It's like we all talk about Zach Goldsmith might be the mayor, but like he has 300 million pounds in an account, and he has a great deal of wealth, and he's trying to connect with the Londoner, which doesn't have that. So let's just get that out in the open, right in the beginning of the discussion, and say, okay, so how are you going to address this? So I think the gardening world is very similar to Zach's and his profile. It's got this huge aristocratic, people think of these fancy gardens and fancy flowers, but actually it's so much more than that. And how do we open that discussion up and really...
Yeah, I mean, just, you know, it's for me, the biggest worry is the industry. That's, you know, I think I'm hoping you guys will sort and bring the kids in. It's people understanding that there's fantastic careers to be had, and understanding that it's a really, you know, there's everything from the arts to the sciences, and I just, that doesn't get shouted about at schools, you know, and that's the bit that frustrates me. I think if we solve that, and you know, you can show people everything that goes on, you'll get people that come in. You know, in a sense, the home-based thing is a prime example. We took on 40 people, you know, and we advertised that for 6 weeks, not very much, and 1,500 young people apply. Well, that proves to me that they're out there, you know, and that's been the last 2 times that we've done that. It's been that many people. So they're out there. We've just got to tell them what the industry is, what we've got to offer, and shout.
Well, that seems like a good moment to perhaps open the discussion up to the floor. I hope you've all found what we've been talking about so far engaging. Does anyone have a question that they'd like to put to the panellists, or a point they'd like to make that's arisen from the discussion? Throw your hand in the air.
They're all hungry.
They're all hungry. They want their dinner. Well, here we go.
Adam, I agree with your point. I think you know, it's almost easy enough to put onto primary schools and show that, yeah, let's grow things, let's grow sunflowers, but then turning it onto secondary school with 16-year-old kids that wanted to go to perhaps further education or do apprenticeships, it's showing what opportunities are there for them next. I'm at Kew Gardens, I'm a student there, and I've been in horticulture for a few years now, and I've started to understand the opportunities that there are really for younger people. I mean, it's amazing. There's things like events you can go to, like the Orchid Festival at Kew Gardens. There's also, you know, understanding and making them understand, you know, where chocolate comes from, sugar. You wouldn't have a climate if it wasn't for plants. And it's just sort of, you know, injecting enthusiasm and showing amazing opportunities there are for younger people.
Fantastic. There was another hand somewhere at the back there. Let's have a microphone. That might help.
I work for the Dutch Tourist Board, and we're very lucky to have a nation that's very much behind its horticulture, and it's seen very much as something that everyone can access and it's free for all. I think a point you were making earlier was that it's actually, in the UK, it's often perceived as an elitist pursuit, and I think that's the barrier we need to break down. We need to have a sort of national rally or a national day behind our flowers here in the UK to make it more popular. In Holland, we have National Tulip Day. It happens every January. People queue around the block in the freezing cold to pick tulips, to be part of the launch of the tulip season, and it's a fantastic sight to witness. And I think if we had something similar in the UK that was free, it would really boost awareness and engage people. And I think breaking down the barriers across the demographic and making things more freely accessible is the way that we need to move forwards.
It's sparking, really, isn't it? When you think about it, we're looked upon across the world as a nation of gardeners, and it's even mad that we're having this conversation, that we haven't just got young people leaving schools and want to become horticulturalists. You know, that's how we're looked upon. You talk about governments. I'm lucky enough to start where you even now travel the world and, you know, draw pictures. I'm going to Singapore. Singapore government spend more on horticulture than they do their army. You know? And funny enough, Singapore's quite a peaceful place. Maybe there's something in that.
Hand up over here.
So Adam, I've got a question for you. You talked about how catering or cooking profession. A lot of that was to do with sort of Channel 4 and the customers' programs that they were commissioning to improve or build personalities. So I guess the question is, do you think the TV programs with gardening aren't working in that way?
This is what we were talking about before. I think the part of the problem is obviously what we were saying before is that gardening in this country, in a sense, there's so many walks of life that garden, and probably at the moment media offers, you know, very quite sort of tight narrative of the section of society, whereas actually it's massive. You have to take cooking, you know, look at the different types of cooking that goes on, and there's different types of programs to suit your tastes. You know, well, gardening is exactly the same.
But I think at that point, someone put trust in Jamie to do his thing.
Agree.
And
Totally
then if you look at the gardening programs now, it's just repackaged. It's
Yeah.
constant. You're like, oh man, I've seen this before. I've seen this type of thing done before. It's like, use creativity, be creative.
I was lucky enough, wasn't I, to work for Jeff Hamilton, who you know was Gardener's World when I thought Gardener's World was really cool. But actually, you know, when you talk about the fear thing, one thing that Jeff was incredibly good at was putting on the things that went wrong as well.
Yes.
So actually, this didn't go very well. Look, you know, which you know, all of a sudden you had a nation of people going, hey, well, I could do that. If he gets it wrong, maybe it's not so bad.
Yeah. And then you have like guys like Hugh Fernley-Whittingstall who come in and they do great food, but at the same time he was moving into gardening. You know, he's talking, you know, like I can farm these carp, I can do this garden, and he was really pushing that, I think, in a way that Jamie wasn't doing it. But at the same time, it had that. I like Hugh, but it did have that touch of aristocracy about it. And it did have that sort of like, you can do this, you can. And whereas I really feel like that's some of the big things we found on a lot of the estates was the moment you start going, I'm here to help you, you can do this. And there's the moment, you know, Kevin Wilson will be like, man, get your hand off me. And just be like, I'm not here to do this because you've told me, I'm here to do this with you. And if it's not, it's a collaborative process. No, and I think that's what's missing in the television programs. It's that there's no collaborative process going on with someone who's hip and cool and who's ethnic and who's a woman doing it in that way. I mean, you know, God bless her, but there's a lot of, you know, that younger and different ethnicity, if you know what I mean.
And also, Hugh's a cook, not a gardener.
But it's not a problem.
Yeah.
The point is that this picture that you're talking about, national and programming, and what is the ethos on the television being portrayed and displayed? It's guys who are like, yes, I say, you over there, that's a good idea. We can do that. I have a carp farm. My cousin has one down the road. And I think what we need to be is like, excellent, that's fantastic. I totally support that. It's a 100% good thing. But let's go into London or into Birmingham and go into like a car park that's been turned into a carp farm, and then like taking all the waste from all the clippings from all the gardens and being fed to them, and then we work on that way. And that community is being empowered to do it. Not like, oh, I just so happen to have an extra couple of acres which we can grow some stuff on.
Yeah, that's what people want to see. People don't want to see a garden that's going to cost them 20 grand to build, because it's just going to put people off, it's just going to scare people away. Yeah. So people want to see something that's accessible to them.
We just need variety, don't we? Ultimately, that's what we
Did
need.
that answer your question, or was that just pissing you off?
Well, I answered your question, didn't I? You need variety. We need more than the bog standard that we've got. We need We need stuff that's going on in urban places. We need stuff going on for young people. We need variety. We need a load more of it. And we need television and media to decide that gardening's cool. That's what we need.
Is it that gardening is that on TV is too cosy and too complacent?
I think TV will tell you that whereas cooking's instant, bish, bash, bosh, and it's good and it looks good, whereas gardening for them is not quick enough, not instant enough. So I think that would be their argument a lot of the time.
I know he wants to say something, yeah. No? I really think you just need to make it, like, it's sexy in a different way, not like Nigella, like, you know, like, this is mixing. Sexy like, I'm gonna, you know, it's the man sweat. That's sexy, you know, like, with your girl, like, you guys are like 20 years old and everybody's working and there's like a vibe happening between people and you know, you're digging this whole thing and that's the reality of it. That's the reality of gardening. Everybody in here has had that moment where you're working hard and you look over and you're like, that person is so gorgeous right now because they're fully engaged in a physical activity to deliver a purpose and you know what it is, whether it's flowers or food. And that's what I think needs to be portrayed.
Question from Helen.
I've actually got 4 points to make, probably no questions. The first one is that we have an ageing population, which I'm happy to represent this evening. And as a self-taught gardener, I know that gardening is traditionally handed on. Emma and Jane both touched on this. But why is no one talking about tapping into the experience of older gardeners? I still garden avidly, but never in skinny jeans. Why can't we have something called the baggy-trousered horticulturalist? So I'm just asking that somehow we have not covered that. It's tapping into experience, not necessarily Latin, but the slow, methodical demonstration of techniques and ideas and tips. And that should be done not just on television, it should be encouraged in the community around the country. That's my first point. The second is that something Adam has talked about, which is education. Why are the best scientists, A-level scientists, being creamed off elsewhere? Why are there so few plant science and botany degrees, no botany degrees anymore? Why are our bright sixth formers not being encouraged into horticulture, which is where industry should be encouraging them, catching them at the age of 17 and getting them into horticulture-related scholarships areas. I know nothing about that because I'm self-taught, but I just know that is another thing that we're not doing properly, is taking the bright scientists and training them.
Partly that's created, I think, by if you go into a secondary school and you start talking to science teachers, there'll be biologists, so there'll be animal-centric.
Well, look what Brian Cox has done for...
Yeah, I totally agree. I agree with what I'm saying. The issue is there.
So we need some academic scientists.
You know, so they don't talk about plants.
Yeah.
So they're instantly getting their best students and going, this is where you want to go. You don't want to go there.
Right,
so.
Point number 3. I'm trying to be succinct, I'm sorry. It's not just about vegetables. I do appreciate that there's this whole thing about grow your own. It can be very discouraging. I think every primary school should be encouraged to grow sweet peas and alchemilla mollis, to grow learn how to propagate seeds and how to care for perennials. And just that, and they could sell bunches at the school gate. I've written about this on my page in the Telegraph. The other thing is I'm having a battle at the moment. I've just locked horns with Kent County Council. We're trying to improve a roundabout in Tunbridge Wells. I'm sorry I come from Tunbridge Wells. It's very predictable, isn't it? Gardening open spacing isn't just as easy as you think. It's all about planning permission and all sorts of ridiculous red tape, which crosses over into health and safety and all that stuff that Jane was talking about. There are all sorts of things we haven't touched on in this room. I've really found it very interesting. I've got pages of scribbled notes. I can't even read them. But thank you. It's been very invigorating.
Anyone else got a comment or a question? I think we're pretty much close. Well, what I'd encourage you to do is, after this evening, is to go and look on Twitter at the GrowRev hashtag, and also to visit the GardenTags /revolution, where there's all the blog posts that have been written by myself and other people, and you can go and read what other people are thinking about this topic. And also we'd love to people to actually act on what we've been talking about tonight. It's not just a talking shop. We'd love to hear on how this has inspired people to actually take some action for themselves and move this forward in a new way. So if you've been inspired, please do share. And there is still opportunities to write guest blogs. So please do get in touch with GardenTags if you'd like to contribute to that. And I'd like to finish by thanking our panellists this evening, Leon, Dale, Emma, Agamemnon and Adam for their participation. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much. And I do hope you enjoy it. Oh, well, yeah, I think we should. I'm not sure what we're going to do with this fantastic Energy Garden Ale.
Drink it.
I was going to say you could give it to me because this has been grown from London's hops. Those are particularly from the Brondesbury station up by Kilburn. So yeah, I thought you could say like whoever wins the best question. What was the best? What did you guys think was the best question? And let's just go to that person.
Oh yeah. I
think it's the woman who was talking about the question around different ages and the passing on that knowledge. I'd like to say
I think that's
that's for you. Yeah.
Give that to her. Thank you very much.